59 miles south of Boston, you'll find the charming seaside town of New Bedford, Massachusetts. Known as America's #1 fishing port and one of the country's most artist-friendly cities, it may come as a surprise that this cute little city is also home to one of the country's biggest unsolved mysteries. Between 1988 and 1989, 11 women were reported missing by their loved ones. 9 of these missing women's bodies would be found near different highways surrounding New Bedford. The media dubbed this string of murders the highway murders. And the mystery? Even 35 years later, no one knows who committed these terrible, violent acts. In today's video, we will dive deep into this mystery, the suspects, and see if we can learn where the investigation stands now. It's time to take a deep breath and let the fresh air in. Hi everyone, welcome if you're new and welcome back if you've been here before. My name is Erin and I am fascinated by all things cults, true crime, and unique spiritual practices. On True Crime Tuesdays, I like to explore a true crime case, and on Spiritual Saturdays, I dive into a cult or extreme religion that I find interesting. And I'll be giving you all a bonus third video on Thursdays throughout November and December, so stick around for that. If you're interested in this type of content, please consider subscribing. I'd really love to have you here, and I'm open to suggestions, so if there's a case or a cult you'd like to see a video about, please leave a comment down below and I'll take a look. I also like to recommend a book at the beginning of my video, and today's book is a great one. I don't think I've talked about it before on my channel. It's called The Wrong Family. It's about a family and a homeless woman that kind of seeks them out as a resource, but they have some really dark secrets, so it becomes clear that perhaps this woman has picked the wrong family. So if you've read the book, please let me know what you think below, and let's just jump right into this case. It's always sad to know that a case is unsolved. The families left behind don't get any closure, and a community rattled by a serial killer lives in fear. That's the unfortunate truth behind the 1989 case of the highway murders. Between March 1988 and April 1989, 11 women had gone missing from the area, and tragically, only 9 of their bodies were found. The bodies were found in very similar conditions. They were often nude, and several had been strangled. They had been dragged into the woods, laid on their backs with their feet pointed towards the highway, and hence were called the highway killings. Interestingly enough, they were also all either drug addicts, prostitutes, or both. It seemed whoever committed these crimes must have known each of the women somehow. The women also seemed to know each other. The first victim to be found was 30-year-old Deborah Medeiros. A woman had gone to urinate in the woods when she came upon the horrifying sight of Deborah's partially nude body decomposing nearby. She had a bra wrapped around her neck, indicating that she had been strangled to death. Deborah was last seen by her boyfriend. He said they had gotten into a fight and she just left. She was reported missing on May 27, 1988, and her body would be found a little over a month later on July 3, 1988. Police knew Deborah. She had a record of substance abuse, and this substance abuse would be the link between all of the women who were victims of this highway killer. Her boyfriend would end up being ruled out as a suspect. The next victim found would be 36-year-old Nancy Lee Pavia. Her body was discovered on July 30th, 1988 by a couple of men who were riding their motorcycles down Interstate 195. She was also found nude on her back with her feet facing the highway. She also had a history of substance abuse and, interestingly enough, was last seen by her boyfriend who she had just had a fight with. The two had a history of dysfunction, but he too would be ruled out as a suspect even though he was well known by police to be a drug dealer in the area. I can't help but find it very interesting that both women were last seen during an argument with their boyfriend. It just seems like a very strange coincidence, and I can't help but wonder if there's some kind of connection here. But of course, that's just speculation. I think when we think of serial killers, we always assume there's one perpetrator, but That odd connection itself makes me wonder, maybe they're in cahoots, maybe different boyfriends of these women are in on this together. Obviously, I don't know, but that is just a theory that I have. On November 8th of 1988, a highway crew came upon the body of 35-year-old Deborah Green DeMello. She too was nude, but this time her clothing was strewn across nearby trees. Items that had belonged to Nancy Pavia were found near her body as well. She also had substance abuse problems and had been arrested for prostitution. In fact, she was last seen leaving a prison work release program. It's unclear if she knew Nancy personally, but whoever did this to her was certainly targeting women with substance abuse problems, who were all somehow connected. Sadly, she left behind 3 children. Later that same month, on November 29th, the skeletal remains of 25-year-old Dawn Mendez would be found. She was walking to a christening party when it is believed that she was potentially attacked. Although her body was almost completely decomposed, a remaining fingerprint was able to identify her. She too had been involved in prostitution and had a history of drug use. A pattern has definitely been established, and the perpetrator had to have been someone all these women knew personally, right? The perpetrator had to know when they would be alone and when they would be their most vulnerable and where they were going and what their schedule looks like and who they were dating. It seems like this should be an open shut case almost, but there's just not enough evidence to pinpoint any one person or multiple people. The next body that was found was that of a woman who was extremely vulnerable. Having last been seen leaving her mother's funeral in May 1988, 25-year-old Deborah Lynn McConnell's body was found on December 1st, 1988. She was discovered by a cadaver dog, fully nude, with the bra around her neck, indicating that she too had been strangled. The last victim found in 1988 was 28-year-old Rochelle Clifford Dopier-Ala. She was found by people who were ATVing in the area. She was partially nude and appeared to have been beaten to death. She also had a connection to Nancy Pavia. The last person she was seen with was actually Nancy's ex-boyfriend. Rochelle had also been in a relationship with a man named Kenneth Ponte, a local lawyer in the area. He also knew the future victims, having dated Robin Lynn Rhodes and having represented Mary Rose Santos in a previous civil case. And we're about to talk about these 2 victims very shortly. But it just seems like too many of these women are either talking to exes of each other's or are last seen with a boyfriend. It's just so strange. I just can't help but wonder if maybe this was like a team effort, unfortunately. So far there have been 6 known victims in 1988, and in 1989, it would seemingly get worse and more frequent. The next body found would be that of 29-year-old Robin Lynn Rhodes. She was last seen in March or April 1988, so a year previously, and her body was discovered on March 28, 1989. She too was a mother and is said to have been an addict as well. And we're going to keep hearing this name, Kenneth Ponte. They also had dated previously. And although he was arrested for her murder, he was released later because there wasn't enough evidence to tie him to the crime. And in another strange connection, Robin was friends with the next victim, Mary Rose Santos. The body of Mary Rose Santos was found on March 31st, 1989, after having been reported missing back in July 1988. She had last been seen dancing at a bar called the Old Quarterback Lounge, and she too had a substance abuse problem and was only 26 years old when she passed away. The final body that was found was that of 24-year-old Sandra Patello on April 24th, 1989. She was a sex worker and also had a substance abuse problem. She'd apparently left her apartment on August 11th, 1988, and was never seen alive again. Her body was found in a bit of a different state, though. She was folded into the fetal position, and it is unknown why. There were also 2 missing women who were never found. They were 19-year-old Cristina Monero, who disappeared in May 1988, and 34-year-old Marilyn Cardoza Roberts, a neighbor of Christina's, who disappeared just 1 month later. All of these women were mothers, addicts, some were sex workers, and all seemed to be in the same community. Many of the victims knew each other, and several of them knew a man named Anthony DeGrazia. DeGrazia was known in the area to frequent the company of several of these women and was known by police because complaints had been made against him for choking the women of the night that he hired. He was actually identified by Margaret Medeiros, who was shown his picture after reporting an assault. She never officially stated it was him, but after bringing DeGrazia in for questioning, authorities decided to hold him on a $180,000 bond. He was released in June of 1990 after spending 13 months in jail due to a lack of evidence linking him to the crimes. After some drama with the DA's office where DeGrazia had made threats to the DA, he was rearrested and then re-released and took his own life soon after. An act that authorities thought was suspicious and timely considering the depth of what he was being accused of, but they would later recant that statement. In a surprising turn of events, a man named Daniel Tavares, who was in jail for killing his own mother, wrote a threatening letter claiming to be the highway killer. He said he knew where the body of another missing woman, Gail Botelho, was, and led police directly to her body. She, too, had substance abuse issues, so when she'd gone missing, police treated her case as another one of the highway killings. She went missing during the same time and was seemingly a part of the same community as the other women. But in the end, there wasn't enough evidence to support that Daniel Tavares had committed the other highway murders. So he was convicted of Gail's murder and a few others as well, but was not found to be the highway killer himself. Gail's family has actually gone on record to share how disappointed they are with how authorities handled their daughter's case, claiming that had they not lumped her into the highway killings, she would have been found much sooner. So the case had gone cold. No more bodies were being found, and no new suspects were being identified. So when Portuguese police came to New Bedford to learn about the highway killer, it's safe to say that this case became even more intriguing. Imitating Jack the Ripper, between 1992 and 1993, 3 sex workers were murdered and disemboweled in Lisbon, and 2 others had been shot in a nearby area. Exhausted of any local leads, Portuguese police traveled all the way to New Bedford because that town had a large Portuguese community, and they believed the strings of murders in both countries could be linked. Many of the highway killings victims had been of Portuguese descent. But unfortunately, yet again, there was not enough evidence to link these sets of crimes. Years later, a man appeared on a game show where contestants had to guess each other's dark secrets, and he confessed that his father had been the Lisbon Ripper. But due to lack of evidence, he was not convicted of those particular crimes. So, who would have thought the small fishing town of New Bedford, a cute, quaint tourist destination, could be home to so much crime and murder? I mean, this case has left a dark mark on the community, and it's been a cold case for 35 years. There's seemingly no end in sight. With technology getting better each decade, one can only hope that this case will get the closure it deserves. But until then, what do you think? Do you think the culprit was DeGrazia, who ended his own life so he wouldn't suffer the consequences of his actions? Or could it be lawyer Ponte, who actually was found dead in his home in 2010? I personally think it would make the most sense to have been the lawyer Keith Ponte. He seemed to know very private details about each woman based on where they were last seen, who they ran around with, and he would know what authorities would be looking for, so he would potentially and allegedly be able to hide evidence. And he would have likely been able to get the victims to trust him enough because he could pull the I'm the lawyer card. Perhaps he offered them support or money or some kind of way to get out of their current set of circumstances. Whoever the perpetrator was, he had to have been deeply interconnected in their community and know the ins and the outs of their lives. And that's really scary to think about. It really makes you wonder, who can you trust? And today's takeaway is never trust a wolf who may be wearing sheep's clothing. You just never know who may be out to get you. I thank you all for joining me on this journey today, and please leave your theories down below. I can't wait to hear your thoughts and what you think happened in this case. I really hope and pray for the families to get closure, even though it's been 35 years. I believe that we have the technology now to solve this case, and I really, really hope you get that soon. So until next time, be safe out there. Thank you for watching. Have a great rest of your week.